former mayors, people that were with the Heritage Committee, people that were with planning. Is that it, Diane, I think? Yeah. So it's been a really exciting process for Diane and I, and the students have been absolutely amazing. I am really impressed. So, thank you. Now, getting to why I am here. As some of you may already know, I did present at planning on Tuesday. I thought it was really important to get this information out to those counselors. They ultimately can make decisions, they can change rules. And I know, I was delighted to be able to come here because I know that you are the main advisory body to council. And if you see that there might be some things that could improve the situation, then you have the opportunity, and you certainly have the ear of council to perhaps make some of those changes. So with regard to James Street Baptist, I sat in on 2 of the permit reviews, or maybe 3. And so I'm truly interested in what was going on, as were many people in the neighborhood. We were concerned with the delegation of powers. We were concerned with demolition versus alteration. We were concerned with the role of public input and citizen engagement. We were concerned with the role of the peer review and obviously the terms and conditions. Now, having said that, I am meeting April the 3rd with members of the planning department, our counselors, and staff from the cultural planning department to address some of the issues. So hopefully I will get that sort of information straightened out. However, it still begs to be reviewed and perhaps maybe some changes made. It is the opinion of the DNA that this should have been deemed too controversial to follow the delegation of powers route. And we looked at a heritage permit guide for the city of Hamilton, and basically they indicated that something like this was of a minor, it was not of a minor nature, but something like this should have come to you folks eventually, and then on to council for the final decision. And then that comes to what is alteration and what is demolition. We have no idea what criteria were used, and that's because this is not our study area. We're here to learn, so we really need that set out for us. And knowing that sort of situation, we really wonder why the Permit Review Committee did not forward this on to you folks and then eventually on to council. And I can remember at one meeting that I sat in, there were a lot of questions asked regarding that the very thing that was going to happen, and people were not in favor of this sort of demolition, minor demolition, I don't know what we call it, was going to happen. So real concern there. And thirdly, public input. The Durand has been active since 1972, and we started because we were losing some fabulous quality housing stock. There certainly weren't designations at that time, but I'm sure many of those buildings, had they still been standing, could have been designated. We still continue to operate, and we have never ever stopped operating. It has been ongoing, and one of our major priorities is heritage. And James Street Baptist is in the Durand neighborhood, and it is a beautiful downtown designated landmark, and obviously we were really upset to see that we did not have the opportunity. So I've been on a mission. I've been on a mission to get my letter out to anyone and everyone that will listen. That's why I went to planning. That's why I wanted to come here and talk to you folks. So I'm hoping that I have your ear. And I have found out that this delegation of powers, couple things I do know now, that it happened in 2005, and the planner that implemented this is no longer with us. So if it can be implemented in 2005, why can't it be changed in 2014? The other thing that I learned from Sean Fraser, who is the guru as far as Ontario Heritage Trust is concerned, he said it is the will of the council as to what happens with delegation of powers. So ultimately it rests with powers, but you people are the ones that can get to council. So I'm hoping that you will indeed review that. Peer review. At one point in time, I thought there was going to be a peer review, and that was based on the questions that were happening. The last meeting that I attended, It did not happen, no peer review. And our concern, we've had some interesting issues with developers, let's just say that, in the Durand. And what they say and what they do can be two different things. So in light of the fact that it was a developers group that came and presented that heritage impact assessment, we were really hoping that there would have been a peer review. At one point in time, I told our counselor that the Durand Neighborhood Association will do a peer review. It's only $300. The cost comes in accommodation and food. So, you know, hopefully we could get somebody from the Hamilton area that could do that. I mean, that went absolutely nowhere. But that's how serious we were about that. And of course, the terms of conditions. The biggest concern is that there is nothing in place for what this is going to look like. All I saw was some sort of glass tower. I keep walking around the perimeter of that building. It is not a very large building as far as width. I know now why he's going 30 stories. How much can you actually fit in from the fragment that's remaining to the back? How far does the parking lot next door, physiotherapy, does that belong to them? What about the space, the little bit of space that probably is no wider than this room? So where is he going to put all of this? And what happens if the developer walks away? I'm not feeling good about this. So those were some of our concerns, and I'm going to say it again, and as you are the advisory body that makes the recommendations to council, the DNA urges you to consider the issues presented and make changes to the process. That is basically what I have to say to you, and I'm very passionate. I know I don't know much, but I'm passionate, and as are the people that are getting to me on this. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or discussion?
Actually, Mike, you're the chair of the permit review. I'd be interested in hearing your response to a couple of those issues. The peer review, for instance.
The peer review, from my recollection, it was deemed that there would be these two written reports, engineering reports on the building, and the verbal given by the engineer that was hired by the developers was adequate. And that wasn't just deemed by the committee, it was also deemed by staff to be adequate. And by the director of planning.
At one time, there was, that was the plan initially, wasn't it, to have a peer review?
No, that wasn't the plan, that was
It was the
discussed.
whole-
It
yeah.
was discussed, and there were a number of people who did put forward that they'd like to see a peer review.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the one verbal and two written reports were deemed adequate.
The final report was paid for by the developer, right?
I do believe the first two were, staff can maybe correct me, the third one was paid for by the developer, but the other two, one of them was done prior to the purchase, if I understand, yes. So it was not the developers, the rather extensive one that talked about all the damage inside the walls.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you guys were in a tough situation there.
It's the longest we have ever sat and deliberated. It is the longest. We had 3 rather lengthy meetings, and there was lots of questions that all of the members had, and there certainly was lots of concern and what is the effect of our decision. No, I would say, and I even said it at the end of the final vote, that was the toughest decision for advice that we've ever made.
Maybe it's because I'm a new member. I had thought that one would then come back to the committee, that we would have a chance to talk about that.
Well, we did talk about it.
No, but not after. Not after.
Yeah, or maybe staff can come in and what the process there is.
For the chair, we did bring it up as provide an update on the process at this committee, and that was in November 19th, I think, the meeting that we discussed that, and I think that would have been an opportunity of this committee if there were additional concerns to flag it, and we probably would have proceeded down another path. And if there were really no comments at this committee, I think that there was a general understanding that what was going forward was what this committee was comfortable with as well. It wasn't a formal question that was asked, but it was discussed, and this committee was informed of the process.
Okay, and I'm not trying to point the finger at you guys.
Oh, no, I didn't say you were.
But perhaps because of my lack of knowledge of how the committee works, I thought always that something that starts at a subcommittee, then goes to the committee, and then on to.
Not always, not always. So if there's no contest, am I correct, it can go straight to director of planning, who can sign off on it, it doesn't even have to go to council. I'd just like to add something.
Yeah.
One of the things that came out of this, like this is one of those really awkward positions that if we actually said, we do not agree, you cannot, we do not advise that this building come down, well, what could happen is that they would go to the next step and it would go to council and there'd be lots of discussions and there'd be delegations and talk, and council could overrule our advice, which they have done a number of times. And from what I understand, once that happens, then we as the permit review and we as the Heritage Committee will have absolutely no say in what happens to that building after we've been overruled. Now, as it is now, because we're part of the process, what's going to happen is that we, as they develop the building, are still going to be part of the process. They are going to have to come to us for us to give advice to council in regards to what is going to happen to that building. Now, if we had said no, we would have lost any control that we would have had. So that's one of the process of deliberation, was to try and maintain some control over what happens to that property.
I think we heard at the last meeting that the conditions still have to be met, where the developer has to post a bond, is that the right term? Has that, sorry,
That's fine, that's fine.
the bond, yeah. Has that taken place yet?
I'm not sure if I can, through the chair, if I can speak to that too much, but we're at the final end of the building permit review stage and the heritage, reviewing the conditions of the heritage permit. So, well, actually, I can say that. We signed off on those first conditions yesterday. We had a letter that we issued yesterday. From a heritage permit. I can't speak to the building permit process. I think that's still in progress.
Okay. One more question, if I can. The last one. The other part that does worry me, usually we like to see a site plan in place. What are they going to do when they take something down? That's been the case. It was the case with All Saints that fell apart. But so in this case, we really don't have a sense at all of what's going to go in there, and that part is worrying.
Yeah, I can understand that. But as far as I know, they are going to be coming to us, meaning this committee and permit review, as their project develops.
Is there a reason why it couldn't be that we see that site plan before the demolition begins?
I'm not sure about the legalities of that.
Through the chair, the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee will be reviewing the development plans, the detailed elevations, plans and elevations for the proposed new building. We can think about how this committee can be involved in that. It may be more just information item, but I can think about how that would, but for sure the Permit Review Subcommittee will review that under the conditions of the Heritage Permit.
But would that be post-demolition or pre-demolition?
Well,
Post.
through the chair, I think it depends on when they do the work, but, yeah. Theoretically, the intent is for it to be posted.
I have Walter. Walter.
Yeah, well, I know the neighborhood associations, they're a big deal in the city now. And when you have someone representing a whole sector of the city here downtown, I don't think we can ignore that. I think, there's a representation here that feels left out. So, I mean, I think we can't ignore that. I don't know anything either, I'm just new too, but all I know
We're not
is-
ignoring it, we're listening to them right now.
But the concern is that
Isn't there a member of the group or associated with the group on the permit review committee?
Well, Diane said something.
Yeah. So,
I'm not on the grand committee.
okay,
I was the founder, but I'm not.
okay.
And she doesn't live in the neighborhood besides anymore.
My point is, I don't think they've been shut out if there's that kind of relationship that exists.
Well, what I thought I heard was that they weren't able to make a delegation to do the permit review.
I heard a number of concerns that were expressed by the
You never.
Would have helped if staff reiterated the provisos that were attached to the moving subcommittee's decision?
Well,
This
staff-
would address some of the concerns that were expressed.
All staff looked at the notes.
It was a question for staff as well, because I think we heard about the permit review process, but Megan mentioned that that was signed off yesterday, and the next step is building permit.
What are they?
Right, okay. Before it's demolished, does there not have to be something in order to get your permit that says this is what we're putting in its place? I thought the city, as Paul said, doesn't like to have vacant lots.
That's what the bond's for.
Through the chair, I'm wondering if Peter would be able to speak to that, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a residential building. I think in terms of provisions for having a approved site plan prior to demolition relates primarily to residential buildings.
I have a hard time visualizing a facade being left and being safe without some sort of construction being very quickly thereafter.
One of the conditions is to ensure that it's not a facade, it's actually because it's freestanding and it can support itself, it's got three sides. There's one of the conditions is that they stabilize that before construction, so at least one of the conditions. Do you have the conditions there? Is my reading?
Yep. So, through the chair, the conditions of approval included, the first part was a conservation plan for the building during this period of alteration. So, we require documentation of existing building and architectural features and finishes in situ. So we have measured drawings and photo documentation of all parts of the building. Specifications and methodology for the protection and stabilization of retained portions. We have that. We have specifications for how we're going to close the rear of the retained portion, how they're going to wrap and weatherproof it, and maintain the roof drainage. We have provisions which will actually be ongoing as the alterations are occurring, but for the inventory and salvage of features and the storage of those features and monitoring them in storage, inspecting them, making sure they don't go missing or sitting in a puddle or something. Then the second part is about the conservation plan for the new construction and the restoration of the retained portions. So the repointing, any restoration work to the window frames, anything. And then the third part of the permit was the securities and ensuring that the work is done, and if it's not done within a reasonable time period, the city can go in and do it with that money. And there were a few other conditions about trying to ensure that this occurred in a timely manner, that if the alterations didn't occur by the end of this year, that we could revoke the permit, that if the rest of the new construction doesn't occur within 2 years, we can revoke the permit, and then amendments to the heritage easement afterwards. So there are quite a few conditions.
Thank you.
Stan?
Through the chair. You're talking about a residential, in residential situations, a site plan is required for what's going to go there. Why isn't that applied to commercial?
Through the chair, that's just our bylaw. That's building services. A bylaw administered by building services, and it's, I think it's actually under the building code that they're required. I don't think here.
I think it has to do with the loss of housing.
Yeah. Residential use.
Janice?
I'm not sure whether delegates has the opportunity to speak again, but I just would like to just point out something, because I'm again really concerned about what we're not seeing. And according to, there's a guide to heritage permits, and that's where I drew this material from, and it said, plans and elevation drawings to scale of the existing, so we know there's going to be that partial fragment of James Street, and or proposed building or structures. So to me, that says that should be included in that so-called site plan as opposed to that glass box that they gave us. And it says including overall dimensions, specific building elements, size, windows, awnings, and construction materials and details. And it is going to be a tower with housing, at least that's what he's saying. So I'm a bit, as you can see, I'm really confused, so these questions truly need to be answered by people that are in the know, and I'm just questioning, I don't know what else to do.
And I think as part of the correspondence that you had sent, staff.
So does everybody have this at this table?
Everyone has it in their packet.
Okay, well, that's terrific.
And
So-
staff were in the process of
Yes.
actually addressing that.
And I
I'm glad to
look
hear
forward
that
to
you've got a meeting set up, so that'll be good to sort of clarify.
And I think that I would like to send whatever I find out, because I'm going to ask them to write it out, because I need it in writing, and I want to put it on our website. I can't answer the questions to my association members, they're asking me the same questions, and I can't answer them.
Mike, do you have a sense of why the building needs to come down now as opposed to when they have their plans in place?
Why is it, well, once they get it cleared, meet all the conditions, they're going to apply for a demolition permit to take it down, and they, as far as I know, are going to be starting with the construction of whatever they can put there.
They haven't even, we haven't seen any plans for what.
MSA, as we speak, are coming up with some ideas of what the building's going to look like.
So, again, does it need to come down before we see plans?
I don't know if they're going to take it down right away. And what, how long do they have after the demolition permit's approved? 60 days? Or less? Or how long is it good for? How long is the demolition permit good for?
Through the chair, I think we'd have to ask for clarification from building services, but I believe it's 6 months.
6 months.
If you don't take any action, then they can revoke it, but I think their action would be for a year, but you're supposed to act in 6 months, so they can pull it back.
Do we have, is it perhaps a good idea to say that we'd like to see the plans before they actually do the demolition?
I think we had the question asked before, I don't think we can command that.
We can't command that
No.
on Heritage
I do
property.
believe that we could advise staff to advise council that we would like to see them. That doesn't mean that we will.
No, exactly, we can't predict what council would do, but this is a designated property after all, so I would
Yes,
think
it
that
is.
there would be special circumstances, and this would be one where
And
we want to see what they're going to
hope
do.
the council would see that, but we don't know.
Is there a risk in giving that a try?
Lots of hands are up here. See what they would say.
I apologize for my late problems with transit, but I read something where they're having trouble with finances, and, you know, it makes sense to, if they're having trouble with finances, how they, you know, they can show us all the proposals they like. You know, if the money's not there, nothing's going to happen, maybe. We may be left with just the towers in front.
But this committee can't make assumptions on their financial situation.
No.
But aren't they somewhere in the request that we've made, asking them to, or with council, asking them to, you know, show that they've got the,
They've achieved their conditional bonds.
sorry?
They've achieved their conditions of bonds as part of the sign-off.
But nowhere in those conditions do they require them to have financing in place before they tear it down. Am I correct?
I think one of the conditions is for financing, is it not? Less the bond, right?
No, through the chair, we've just asked for a letter of credit based on an estimate for stabilizing and protecting the building during the alterations and for any subsequent restoration. And that's all the bond is for. I mean, that Heritage Act deals with the heritage resource, so I don't think we would be able to request that under the heritage permit. It has to be reasonable and related to the request.
I've heard nothing about any financial problems.
Was there any other questions?
That's fine.
Wolf?
Yeah, one of the things is just to, so to speak, about the review subcommittee and some of the questions that were asked here, they're very pertinent questions and very good questions. But the review subcommittee spent, as Michael said, spent more time than ever before discussing. We've asked all these questions in depth. One of the big things that the review subcommittee was concerned about was permission given for demolition for the back half of the church prior to having a full disclosure or intent of what they're going to put up.
Great.
Staff made certain recommendations, and the subcommittee, in the end, those of us who were really adamant about making it a proviso, no permits being granted until that has been declared or indicated, was that because of this type of structure, because of the type of location, but and going through the normal city routine of getting site plans, etc., that was something that was not applicable or possible at this early stage. Consequently, the provisos that were written into the approval for the development to come back to the subcommittee at some point in time prior to doing of design into the design stage was also part of that requirement. So the subcommittee did a lot of work to try to mitigate, to try to address some of the excellent questions that this senior committee is asking at this point in time. And in the end, a number of compromises made. Look at give and take, which is really what the subcommittee, in most instances, ends up having to do, because we can't always have it leaning, I'm going to be in trouble for this, leaning towards the heritage demands. At the same time, we can't allow the developer to carte blanche and to destroy the heritage impact of the city.
Councilor Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I apologize for coming in late. I'm going to have to leave shortly. We're still in budget deliberations, and that's why Councillor McCaddy's not available also, and Councillor Ferguson's out of the country. I guess my question through you to staff, and not sitting on the permit review itself. The applicant, the property owner himself, I mean, is he amenable to coming before this committee and giving some information at a certain time? I'm wondering if that might alleviate some of the fears and concerns of making a request that he make presentation similar to we've had Mr. Spilacci from the Connaught come forward and make presentation. It gives a bit of a comfort level. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask staff if that's possible.
I think I can answer that. I don't think that Louis would have any issue coming. I'm actually, if you want to talk to him, you have to talk to his public relations firm, which I'm doing. And they are afraid that he will be attacked or it will be a negative experience. So there would have to be some kind of understanding that there would not be suddenly 50 people here that are going to be waving their placards saying that you can't take this building down, because if he thought that was going to happen, he won't come.
Well, then I guess the next step would be to get consensus around the table that would not be the direction that we would intend to go in, and at least get the information by the committee members so we could put it in the public record on our agenda and on our minutes as to his presentation. I certainly would feel comfortable if that could go forward. I think that would certainly address a lot of the fears and concerns at this point. And there's always that fear that, and I understand the Durand neighborhood and the fears of, I mean, we only have so much control, there's only so much we can do. And, if we can at least give the confidence to the applicant and the owner of the property that we'd like to know what he's doing and certainly support him going forward as best as possible. I think that would be a good initiative.
So we should probably have Louis and the architect.
That'd be great.
And SACO. I will talk to, David's now taking over for the PR firm, because Gwen, who is the normal spokesperson, she's away. And I have his number, and I can call him with permission of the committee here to see if that's a possibility that he and the architecture firm can come in and make a presentation. But it will be, again, there's got to be a proviso that it would be a friendly presentation. Because I have a feeling that they'll say, if it's not friendly, one, we're not going to come if we think it's going to be unfriendly, because they've already told me that about something else. And there's probably, he will leave.
Madam Chair, before I leave, and I apologize, because I do have to get back to budget, we just might have it done this year, I'm not sure. But I want to thank Diane and Janice for coming forward. Janice made a presentation to us before GIC, also on this planning Tuesday. We've been from meeting to meeting to meeting, finishing almost 7 o'clock every night this week. But I just want to thank them for coming forward. It's not an easy decision. I certainly concur with my colleagues on this committee. This is not an easy process. It never is when you're dealing with conditions that we are bound by, and we can only go within those parameters. So hopefully, with Michael's direction, you'll follow through with that intent, and I would love to be here when the applicant come forward and make presentation. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, I have 2 more people on my list. I have Paul and I have Walter, so we can maybe just tie up the discussion.
I think that is a good idea for him to come. 2 things. I don't think we want to say this necessarily going to be a friendly conversation. It'll be a courteous conversation. I mean, he's growing up. He's spending tens of millions of dollars downtown, or plans to. You have an idea that you believe in and you defend it. We would ask questions, every question that occurs to us. We wouldn't libel him, but we would be thorough.
Their concern is not so much for the committee, but it's for the delegations and various other people that are against this project.
Michael, I can assure you, I would not be rude.
Wasn't looking at you, but some other people I know, some other people I know that might come in and be a little aggressive.
And secondly, I hope that this will take place before demolition began. That's important.
I'll call them, with the committee's permission or approval, I will call them today,
The fact is that this,
or email them today.
we have it's hard enough to get a building designated in the city. This building has been designated. It deserves special treatment, and we have to look after it the very best we can. That's our job here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Paul said for sure, because that could be, what does that mean, a friendly conversation? I mean, we're going to have to ask some questions. I think that's appropriate. I mean, that's very subjective to say it's got to be put this kind of condition on people here.
But it wasn't about the people.
It isn't the people here.
I made that clear. It's not about the people here. It's about some people that might come and would be aggressive. And if that's going to happen, they won't come.
And we've seen this with that Art Moderne building where alterations means everything gets ripped out, right?
Which building?
The Art Moderne, that's
Oh, there.
It just had windows conserved, and ripped out. So, there's a loss. I think an idea for all of us to think about is property rights are one thing, and yes, we want to encourage that, and we don't want to step on any of that, but there is a loss to the community as well. For people that go by there when buildings are taken down.
We also have a history in this city, Steve.
You have to fight well for that.
Okay.
We'll have to-
Stories.
I just wanted a point of information. Are we aware that barricades are up on the south side of the building that look like they're getting ready for demolition?
Yes.
Are we aware of that?
They've had barricades up for,
Or
they've had barricades up for.
the safety
No,
barricades.
no, they're on the north side.
And they're on the south side.
Now they're on the south side.
They've been there long.
In front of us on it.
Yeah, I've also seen in our deliberations as a committee that one of the alternatives an owner has is to just leave it there and let it fall down. And I think we always have to have on the back of our minds, yes, what we would love to see happen, what we would hate to see happen, and what we ultimately end up having to accept as happen.
Yeah, that's, can I speak for that? That's an awesome point, but, that brings up a whole new subject, and maybe we need to attract good developers. They're out there, and maybe we just need to go after them.
We have quite a few of them right here in Hamilton.
And I'll tell you, I know a few that would do good work, real good work, that we're gonna be, they're gonna be working with us on heritage attributes and things like that.
those developers have an opportunity to buy this property as well.
And because we don't like a developer, or we have questions about a developer, doesn't mean that we should give them such a hard time that they walk away. So if it's somebody we want to buy the building, buy the building, that's not a good idea.
Well, maybe we can attract new developers, that's all I'm saying.
So I think from our discussion, we've come up with a couple of things. There's a meeting that's planned, so I think we, as a committee, we need to have an update on what happens from that meeting, so that'll come back to our next. We also, next steps is asking the developer to come and make a presentation.
Yeah.
So I think
Good idea.
as part of the motion, if all the members are happy with that, we'll get Michael to communicate with the developer and with staff and organize something for next meeting if we can.
Next
Or
meeting.
or next meeting.
Okay.
For the next meeting.
Ooh, okay.
Try for the next meeting. May I have that motion? Ron, seconded by Paul, all in favor? Carried. May I have a motion to receive the presentation from Janice and Dan? Michael, seconded by Kathy, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much, I really appreciate that. And I certainly would like to, is there any way that I can find out, is there any way that I can get agendas? So that I know what's coming up on meetings?
I believe from the correspondence I had with you, Janice,
Yeah.
you should be on the mailing list.
Oh, that's terrific.
Good job.
Okay. Thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And please, don't forget, promote.
Getting back onto our schedule, we have item 8.2. 8.2 is correspondence from the Hamilton Public Library respecting the potential of Kenilworth historical designation for the Kenilworth Library. If you've had a chance to read that letter, it looks basically like the library board is very mindful to they want to be listed as a building of significance. Is there any discussion on that item? Any comments? Kathy, you're excited?
This is a great news for our committee. We don't often get this, but this is great news for us.
May I have a motion to receive item 8.2? Stan, second by Kathy, all in favor? Carried. Item 8.3 is 501 Upper James. There's the sales advertisement in your package.
That should be Upper Sherman.
Yes,
So
what
it is
it
on
was.
Buckland, yeah.
Kathy, did you have any comments or did anyone have any discussion?
Honestly, I have no idea where we should go from this. I just saw it in the real estate advert. I drove by it. It's a gorgeous stone building, or was. Part of it still is. I'm at the will of the committee. I don't know what to suggest here.
Maybe it should be referred to the inventory committee for further research and added to the list of buildings that are of interest.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So moved.
Thank you.
So Will, seconded by Kathy? All in favor? So that will be forwarded on to,
As of what?
be forwarded on for research and inventory.
Oh, so now we're going to buildings of interest.
Just so people understand the process we use at the Inventory Research Committee, if something arrives for us to look at, we, in conjunction with the staff, look to get a preliminary assessment so that we would be needing people within our subcommittee to actually do that work. Because staff, as you already know, heavily burdened with all kinds of other projects.
Item 8.4 is our correspondence from Robin McKee, who is president of the Hamilton Mountain Heritage Society, respecting the concerns with Century Manor. Just going through the letter, the Heritage Society is having difficulty getting any response from the ministry. They've asked for time and time again for visits and tours, and they've been declined. So we've been issued this letter. We have the opportunity to do something.
What I thought about was, yes, we're going to the owner, right? That's government. Isn't the Ontario Heritage Trust part of the government and part of the ownership? Maybe we should be directing our requests through that arm of government, and in some way, can they influence the other arm of government to permit a visitation to the property? Because obviously going directly to the owner is not getting what we want.
So we can certainly have some correspondence with the Ontario Heritage Trust, if that's what the committee wants to do. Is there any other questions or comments?
Is the Ontario Heritage Trust an arm of the government, or they?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And do they carry any way, no, do they carry any sway?
Absolutely.
They do? Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good idea.
A reminder that, Lincoln Alexander used to be to the local MPs that are in India. It's rather embarrassing that you can't even visit a building.
So the motion would be to request from council the opportunity to write some correspondence to him.
Ontario Heritage Trust.
Yeah.
So Ron, do I have a seconder?
That's it.
Michael, all in favor? Carried. And Kathy's abstained from.
Oh.
We have the 30-year facility management lease on the other
Oh,
property,
okay.
so it's a conflict for me.
Kathy, did you want that listed as a conflict?
Yes, please.
The other item that sort of came up around that is whether or not we wanted to make contact with the ministry and find out if we can have a presentation, a condition update. I think that was something else. Oh, so just enough, so the correspondence has been forwarded, so we'll wait to see maybe a future update. Should we make motions? Okay, so just some discussions that have been going on. If we would like an update from the ministry and get possibly a presentation in the future, we need to make that request. So we just amend the motion that's on the table, so correspondence with the OHT and communication directed to the ministry of infrastructure.
Request the presentation.
Is all committee members in favor? Item 8.5 is our Heritage Awards update. So Monday, April 7th is our Heritage Awards. It's going to be at the Ancaster Old Town Hall.
It's my birthday too.
Oh, is it really? Oh, we'll have
So
to.
I
we'll have to sing
instead
that.
of rubles like y'all sent to Ukraine, you can just bring dollars.
We're throwing a big party. Councillor Ferguson has kindly covered the cost of the facility for us. So, slowly trying to get a hold of all of the award winners to make sure that they can come. Council members have been invited. The mayor will be there to do the presentations. We'll get our snacks all sort of in order, and certificates will get done and signed so that we have those for presentation.
I'll be
So things are sort of moving along. I have the invitation ready for all of the members at this table. If you want to forward that on to any of the groups, the historical board, any of the groups you're related to, feel free to do that.
Another subcommittee.
And that's
the recipients been notified yet?
slowly they've all sort of.
Yeah, because I got a tour of the new facility that Core Urban's developing on Houston and Kenmore. And I was just talking about it. He said, oh, I didn't know. So he's now recording what it is.
Oh, okay. So it's been working through getting all those invitations out. Okay, so that's just that update on that. May I have a motion to receive? Michael, seconded by Stan, all in favor? Okay. Added item 8.6 is for the Waterdown East Flan Road Book Fair. In your yellow package, we just recently received a letter from the Flan Road Book Fair. Again, in preparation for the upcoming event that's in November. So this committee, it's up to your decision whether or not you'd like to participate again. And the education subcommittee initially takes care of that. What we need to vote on is if we'd like to participate, and then the purchase of tables.
It's kind of like a tradition, we've been there in all the years I've been on the NHC, and almost be observed as, why aren't they here this year? We didn't go.
So we would be requesting $30 of the budget to attend. Well,
I know we've been there every year, but didn't, I thought the discussion after last year was, is it worth it? You know, that nothing was selling and, you know.
I think what came of that discussion is that it didn't matter what we were selling, it was there as
It's a network.
here.
Stony Creek Historical goes every year, and we sell probably one $5 book, but it's still worth it because we get the exposure. People hear about us and how to contact us, and I think that's.
Where is it this year? Same place?
Same place, but they're focusing on, the theme is children's books, so they're trying to focus on brain family. They're trying to get away from the older end of heritage, and they're trying to get in the newer families.
Really? That's a great one.
What do you got?
Getting away from the older repairs.
Trying to draw in some new, trying to draw in the new family. May I have a motion to approve? Off the top.
Yeah, this is not voting, but I can go back to the thing from the afternoon from retail.
So may I have a motion to approve the $3? Ron, second by Michael. All in favor? Carried. Our next item is added 8.7, and that's in regards to the Hoover School. Walter, if you want to start off the discussion?
Yeah, since I've been on the committee, there's been a lot of people, most people that have ever contacted me on an issue, and there seems to be a lot of interest in the sector of Ward 3 there to designate King George School. We've even been presented with a little bit of information here. It's built in 1911, Gage Street, called Trolley Street at the time, where there was a hospital there during World War II, convalescent hospital. Even had a barber that was teaching cutting hair in the 1960s. So now it's kind of a nice thing that's going on there because it's being reused, and I've got some information here that says we're always hearing about you can't reuse these buildings. It's too cost prohibitive to reuse them. And the board installed modems and to give workers wireless. It would have cost 4 times as much to retrofit or rent elsewhere, he added. So this is out of June 3rd, 2012, Spectator. Board invests thousands in shuttered school. So it just shows you can use these buildings, and so I just wanted to advise or put forward that idea of the designation of that building, investigate that. And if I can go further, maybe the idea, this might be out there, but the idea of Parkview Pool, Jimmy Thompson Pool, Scott Park School, and some of the surrounding buildings. I happen to know some of the owners in the surrounding buildings that housed the athletes during the 1932 Commonwealth Games. So there's 1 or 2 there that might be interested as a district to have that looked at, if that's possible. I think they're all eligible. And I think another option is, especially for Parkview School, is under the provincial policy plan, it's a heritage cultural landscape. I mean, we have kids in there going in with a grade 2 education, and there's not a lot, but some of them in 4 years get out of there and they go to college, and that's amazing. That's an amazing thing.
So you're saying protect Parkview?
I'm saying look at it, yeah. I'm suggesting that we should look at it as a heritage district.
Because you're aware that it's the province that has told the Hamilton School Board to knock it down. It's not the board here in Hamilton. They have been mandated to knock down that school and the one behind it, and to build a new school.
Well,
And their hands are tied.
Well, the trustees represent the people, and now they've brought so much attention to themselves that every election is going to be looked at as a trustee, whereas before you never did look at them. So now they represent the people. Again, maybe they should go and lobby for the people to the province and talk about how our communities are dying because our schools are being closed down and we have to go to the super school, bus our kids to the super school. So that's another issue. I'm just advising on the heritage issues, which include that, for sure. And I just want that idea out there. That's what I'm advising.
I agree that they're knocking down too many schools. As a matter of fact, not that I'm campaigning, but for those of you who don't know, I am running for the school trustee in Ward 3. One of the things I'm going to be working towards is trying to get them to reuse and adapt a lot of these schools.
Is that a conflict?
No? Funny guy.
Point of information, in Missing Article there about the remotum and all that, they did it as a result of a $50,000 lab donated by Staples, who realized it was a needy school. And to take that school, I know it's a board decision, but to take that school and franken it into the high school was a very poor decision on the part of our Board of Education. That comment.
Ron?
Walter, as one of the co-chairs of the subcommittee, the inventory subcommittee, if you could formalize your recommendation with an email to Stan and I, we'll get it on the agenda for the King George School.
Do you need a motion for that?
We will.
Yeah, I was going to say, said a lot of great things, and will probably make sense to take out one piece of that for starters, and that would be King George School. And anybody who hasn't been to that school, take a walk through it. I was through there a few months ago. And it's being used, beautiful shiny hardwood floors, big hallways, built strong 100 years ago. It wasn't really the province's mandated, only Michael, that they tear down King George School. They said build a new school. They didn't say you have to tear down King George to do it. And that whole thing, until it's done, it ain't done. It's still in flux, and I think there's still a chance there. So absolutely, I agree that let's take a stab at, let's take a look at King George. Yeah.
You're right, looking at pieces and then.
Yeah.
So the motion, Walter, if you'd like to put that forward, is that the item of King George be reviewed and sent on to the editor.
We mentioned Parkview too.
I wonder, does go to staff, or are they just so you're thinking?
Well, typically how we're trying to, now that we have an inventory research subcommittee that's back up and running, is that's the first step, and then it goes for staff to.
Fair enough, let's put that on.
Kathy?
What happened to our liaise with the board? Where did that go?
It went.
Is it not going to happen? Are we not joining their meetings? Are they not joining ours? It
Well,
kind of,
We told them that we would contact them when there was something about the schools coming up and invite them. And we had yet to invite them.
I forwarded an email from a friend of mine to Megan and Alyssa. She works for the board and she works in the property department, and she had a question, and I didn't presume to answer it. I just said to her, these are the two email addresses. I probably didn't forward it, I'm sorry. I gave her your email addresses for any questions about properties in question that had potential heritage value. So I'm not sure if she forwarded that to someone on the board that she may work with.
Well, I think our last conversations with the board was they were really relying a lot on John Aikman to be the person to do a lot of the research, and so I mean, that might be the person we need to look at the properties.
I can be the advocate for that. John Aikman is speaking at the Stony Creek Historical Society next month on Salt Fleet from the old Wentworth Board, and he's bringing archives from the old Salt Fleet School Board.
I think you need to talk to him. So, Walter, we've got the motion, seconded by Ron. All in favor? Carried. That's a good question. Do we want to have a motion about the district as opposed to just looking at King George?
Yes, I would.
That's something staff would look at. You don't want to have a voice in it?
Yeah,
He wants to prepare a brief, like the information that.
If that's possible, I know there's separation there, but I think it should be looked at, as well as Scott Park, school, buildings there. And also, I'd like to see, like, you guys are more the experts, original policy statement, and investigate Parkview specifically as a cultural heritage landscape because of what's gone on there for the last 50 years.
Just a question. We talk about districts as geographically something. Is the school board calls itself a district?
Well, they don't even own.
Through the chair, I think that's just semantics. I think those are just two
Well,
words that are used in different ways.
it's semantics, but it's significance. Why don't we call the school board a district and deal with all their schools?
Generally, you refer to a district as somewhat of a contiguous landscape, if you will.
Well, it's
Some are
continuous.
considered
They all
cultural
have
heritage
the
landscape.
same contextual.
There may be individual properties owned by the school board, the district, that may be considered a cultural heritage landscape in themselves. But I don't know, you can't necessarily pick in isolation individual properties throughout the city and refer to that as a district. That wouldn't meet the criteria of how to evaluate heritage districts.
Which was my point. I think the most important part, the Jim Townsend Pool is pretty important, but I think it's the King George School is probably the most important. I think if you start putting lots of other buildings in there that you want to protect, I don't think you'd be paid as much attention to it. I think if you focus on the King George School.
Well, I'm just going by what people are, you know, there's a 300 signed petition out there, there's, counselor seems to be on board with this stuff. Spoke with them.
And just as a point of clarification, so there could be, I guess, a considered concentration of potential cultural heritage resources, but just as a refresher, Jimmy Thompson is currently, there was the request to designate staff in the preliminary screening, it's on the register, and then further potential cultural heritage assessment work has been put on hold until there's more discussions in terms of what the actual plan for development might look like and what could or couldn't be sort of integrated into that development. And then in terms of King George and Parkview, technically those are on the same parcel.
Yeah.
So any investigation of that particular property may also include Parkview. So there is currently, I guess, an investigation already happening of those properties, just as there's a concern there, but then any sort of coordinated, I guess, evaluation of the properties together as a part of the landscape could be looked at as well.
Awesome.
So I just have a question, I'm not sure I heard you correctly. Are there community members who want to say Scott Park School?
Yes, that's come up actually.
Yeah.
It's a brutalist design, and there's no timeline on under cultural landscapes. I don't think it's how many years it has to be in existence.
Thanks.
There's a lot of anger towards that building, but there's also people who appreciate it.
Are you a grad, Sean?
No, I'm not.
That would be conflict.
No conflict there.
So Walter, you're looking for staff to review and comment on potential for a district review, or
So I think
do you want
it's
to do
similar
this
in
two
terms
separate
of
things?
Please.
Two separate.
That's for delegation.
So Ron will be looking at King George, may I have a motion for
Wrong.
staff? I think Ron's going to look at it. Okay, so Walter and Michael, all in favor for the motion for staff to review the district?
sorry. No, okay. Just, we'll talk to him. We'll talk to him.
You'll both come back.
Okay.
Item 9 is for motions. There are no motions. Item 10 is notices of motions. There are no notices of motions. Item 11 is general information and business. Item 11.1 is our Heritage Designation Work Program. This is our quarterly update.
Question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the recommendation with respect to 30 property was that they would be put on off the city register or work to do that, but it would also be added to the work program designation as a relatively low?
So through the chair, unfortunately, you weren't in attendance at that meeting when it came back to the parish committee. The committee did recommend adding to the register. That's since taken place. It went to council for approval, obviously, this consultation took place at this meeting. In terms of the request to designate, the recommendation to designate, that was discussed at the committee. And then there was, staff were directed to confer with the ward councillor and to contact the owners to seek input as to what their thoughts were on designation, to move that opening step before actually moving forward with that recommendation to designate. The owners had been contacted by mail. They did indicate by phone that they had received the letter, and staff were available to meet if they wanted to discuss anything further, but nothing has taken place after that.
So the outcome of that will determine whether it actually goes on.
Well, I guess at this point, it's theoretically in limbo. The property owners don't want to meet with staff or don't have any further questions and don't want to give a position on what their thoughts are on designation, then at this point, there's no direction for staff to move forward from that unless the committee wanted to move forward with a new motion or recommendation.
Thank you.
We're on work plan, correct? Okay. You still have two properties that are in they say in progress. What exactly is in progress? Specifically, 71 Claremont. And last time it was falling apart and everything else. We're still going to designate it? And we sent out consultants to spend money for new costs?
Through the chair, we're not going to be hiring consultants for that one. That's in progress internally. To be frank, I think done that's the post office before that, but then it's internal work. It's on our list for internal work. It's not going out to consultants. It's mostly done internally.
So, excuse me, further to that, what about other properties further down the list? For example, 5256, Charlton Hall is being declared surplus by the city. We're still going ahead with it?
Through the chair, so as you'll see in terms of the status of that particular property under work program, that staff had retained a consultant and they have drafted a cultural merit assessment. The next step is that assessment will go through into our research subcommittee as per our council approved designation process before it comes to full committee here. And in terms of concern about surplus, it had been identified originally for potential designation when surplus was being considered, I believe, in 2007 or 2008. So in terms of, I guess, a position of implications of it being surplus, that doesn't change its status and where we are in the process. In fact, there's a desire to coordinate the timing of the designation as it relates to any potential surplus of the property.
Okay, the semi-detached property, am I correct? So is that both properties, both the private one and the city one, or just the city part?
Through the chair, so the property itself has two former individual lots that have since been joined. So there's a semi-detached 56 that's connected to 64. 64 is privately owned, 56 is publicly owned. And then there's a breezeway connecting that semi-detached building to a formerly single-detached building, 52. So right now that's all in one lot. And you'll see in terms of the report, the consultant does look at, I guess, the implications of, and you'll see this later, but a designation bylaw as it relates to, I guess, if the property is surplused theoretically as one lot versus if it were to be severed. But those things will be discussed at an internal level in terms of how the city actually will move forward if there is surplus.
Thank you.
It's not a straightforward property.
Not usually are.
Bouncing back up to the Hawthorne Gatehouse on Claremont. Am I right in recalling that at last meeting, we talked about staff contacting the owner of the gatehouse? So,
Yeah, through the chair, I believe we discussed it, and to be honest, it wasn't in the minutes, so I we can look at doing that. I have the owner's contact information.
Okay. Just a clarification, TOR.
Terms of reference.
Once they're drafted, what happens to them? Because I think 3 months ago, we had that for John Street.
Yeah, through the chair, but there's just, in terms of our roster process and the consultants on the roster, there's a need to distribute them evenly, and there's just an administrative, I guess, issue that we're currently dealing with before we can actually send out the terms of reference for those two.
What do you mean by an administrative issue?
In terms of qualification for the roster, changing the staff from certain consulting firms, and making sure that they still meet the requirements of the roster category before it's sent out.
So 2015, last item, Gore Park, public park. So it's the park that's being designated? Is that- yeah. And the address of the park is 1 Houston Street South. So if you live in Gore Park, that's your...
The one Houston Street South, not this building.
There's nothing wrong with Houston Street.
Yeah, hey, we'll buy us.
Sorry, through the chair, the reason why we shifted and gave property address, because there was a request from the committee to get clarity for, yeah.
And I appreciate that. Yeah, no, thank you.
Are there any other questions or is any others?
I guess this list provokes it. Much of the discussion with respect to the buildings on Thorpe Park that have been in the news lately. We talk and defend the city's position that it's critical to the district, that district defines the city and all of those wonderful words. Should we as a committee be considering that this area be a heritage district and that all of the buildings around the park be designated and protected?
Well, the district, doesn't mean all the buildings are, just means the district.
No, I mean create a separate, Dundas style heritage district where any changes in those districts, in those buildings must come through the review process.
The streetscape.
Should it? Again, I don't know if you need to answer it here, but I think that we'll put it on the next meeting to think or to talk about that after we give the talk.
If it's okay, we can add it to the next agenda.
This is Chair, this is a comment. If that comes back to the committee, then staff should have to be a lot of work to make sure that it's explained what's involved in creating such district.
Oh, yeah, I just think the discussion needs to happen because we regularly see that as an aspect of why are we moving as we are with respect to the properties.
From what I understand, for an area to be designated, all people involved, 80% of it, correct me if I'm wrong, have to agree with the area to be designated. Like your designated area, like you've done, it's like with my street, 8%, a little over 8%. So you've got the 8% of the owners of those buildings agree that it would be part of the designated area.
Well, for the Ontario Heritage Act doesn't provide a number or that requirement. It's just that would make it go a lot more smoothly. These types of things tend to be very controversial, and especially in commercial areas.
Yes,
History has shown other areas of the province that have done commercial area districts, they're long, drawn-out processes.
I would just suggest that if we're already at the controversial level.
Well, see, this is a good thing, this all ties into getting new developers, because I think you went to Shipley, and he's got the statistics about how Heritage District values are higher. And so that's, from a financial point of view, is a good attractive thing, right? So it could be a very positive thing.
I think it also implies that we're being more strategic about our heritage resources, rather than looking at things individually or all that. when somebody decides they're gonna do something to a particular building, that we look at it in terms of managing the inventory or the resources, rather than just reacting.
So we'll make sure that's on the next meeting agenda for discussion. May I have a motion to receive the work plan? Michael, second by Sam, all in favor? Carried. Item 11.2 is a subcommittee evaluation tool. I think Jasmine, did you?
Yes, so this evaluation tool has been requested by the Service Department that each subcommittee fill us in and return it back by 8 business works department, help us assess the subcommittees and their mandates. I'll leave it in the chair's hands. This can either be done at this time with the committee, or it can be submitted by the chair on the committee's behalf.
So this is individual, each person on the committee fills it out, or?
No, we'll do it as a committee as a whole.
So,
Okay, so at the meeting, answer the questions.
can I get some clarification to see subcommittee? So there's an expectation of subcommittee chairs to do this with their subcommittees?
Yes.
We get paid extra for that?
I would settle having my
I
property.
think that needs further clarification. This is a subcommittee.
There's no
Correct.
such thing as a
So you mean this committee or Correct. subcommittee of the subcommittee? This subcommittee only, the heritage.
So not the.
We don't need to.
Also, I don't know for mine.
So fill this out and give it to you.
We fill out one.
Just give us.
We just fill out one
Not
sheet right there.
So either we can go question by question and get a consensus, or you can just.
I trust the chair.
Yeah, we don't want
Okay, with the hands of the chair.
We empower you.
to, or we be out there.
I'm always being empowered. So I need someone to, first and second.
There you go.
My podcast, that sure stands, I hands up. All in favor?
And if anybody first and second, just put down Michael and Stan.
What takes
Good luck with this, take no prisoners.
Item 11.3 is our buildings and landscapes. Item A is our endangered buildings and landscapes in the red category. Tivoli, Councilor McCarthy's not here. Bookhouse, Will.
No news.
The Royal Canal.
Moving along well, apparently the opening for sales, like the office is going to meet schedule, I believe it's April, May.
Andrew's House.
No news on that either.
Century Manor.
As discussed.
Beach Canal Lighthouse, Kathy.
I went to the meeting a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I guess, a week and a half ago, and they're looking for ideas right now to put protective yet attractive coverings on the windows so that A, the windows don't get broken, but B, that there were suggestions that they put like a picture on the inside of what the house would have looked like back in 1858, the period of the structure of the keeper's cottage. So they were throwing out a bunch of ideas like that. They had a great speaker. It seems that they're doing, it's very, very slow process for them to get any kind of control on having their volunteers do work, but the speaker who spoke is Erno Rossi from Port Colborne, and he has done some incredible work on getting permissions from the Federal Department of Fisheries, I believe, for the Port Colborne Lighthouse, which he has contributed some of his own funding and raised money for. I've got his contact information. And they actually put tours on during Canal Days, I believe, in the summer down there. He's going to come and speak to Stony Creek Historical about Crystal Beach in the fall. So he's got some great presentations put together. It was a good meeting, good meeting.
Charles and Paul.
No news, except previous news.
Aubrey Zimmerman House.
I've got a new staff or something.
Through the chair, there was a report that was considered by GIC yesterday regarding the surplusing that property. And it was passed by that committee. It still has to go through council next Wednesday, but so the surplusing the property has essentially been approved.
once it goes to council, especially the parties who are interested in things, they will be advised of the
Yeah, so through the chair, I'm not exactly sure on all the process, but I think it has to be circulated. I don't know, it's circulated through the city already. There'll have to be a notice, and it'll be published in the newspaper. And one of the conditions or recommendations that was approved was that it enter into a heritage conservation easement, as well as the designation that's already on the property. So that we can clarify the existing designation and add some other features, because it only covers the exterior of the house. And there's landscape features, archaeology, and some interior features that we'd like to include in the easement. So there may be a bit of time getting all that together.
If I can ask, once it's gone through council, can you let me?
Yeah.
So does this sort of thing get offered to the general public as well?
It has to.
Yeah,
It has to. It's public knowledge and was put out. Now, there may already be somebody who's kind of favored, but yeah, everybody's got to be made aware of any property the city owns and so forth.
It's going to be a bidding war, that's good. Good way to make money for the city.
One Jones Street.
I have no update.
Mohawk Trails Pool. No update. 18 to 22 King Street East. Paul?
And 24, 28, we remember last month that they had a order to demolish if they didn't meet property standards, but that was withdrawn. So I emailed Jason Farr last night, asked him any update. He said, heard they are appealing the property standards committee on the order, therefore do not need to comply until they are heard. So it looks exactly the same over there as it has for some time. I don't know if staff has anything further on that? No?
I spoke to David Blanchard this morning as chair of the program review, asking him what his plans were because he would be coming to us because now that it's designated. And I've got some very interesting information. He was telling me that 24 is not designated. I didn't know that. Did you know that? Part of the plan that they didn't designate 24. He said it's not heritage. But he's not sure if that can be removed and taken off the building beside it because he figures it's integral to the structure beside. So he actually was talking to me about maintaining the buildings, and he said, but it is going to be difficult with the amount of money that the city's offered, the 1.1 million, because he said it's probably going to cost, and as you've heard this number before, $2 million. And he said, I only paid $400,000 for these buildings, and you want me to spend $2 million just to keep the facade. But he did say to me he has every intention of keeping the facades, and he also told me that he realizes that his appeal for the designation, he's gone to an advisor or a separate committee to come in and take a look at the legality of it being designated, and he says he doesn't think it's going to go anywhere. And apparently, maybe, no, Peter's not here, there's a meeting on either April the 4th or April the 6th, I guess it would be April the 6th, where he's coming with a lawyer, and he's going to be talking to heritage people from the city in regards to what happens next. Now, he was I was really pleased that he called me back, and he did not come across like somebody who intends of knocking those buildings down. He says, I really want to keep those facades, it's just the money that it's going to cost to do so. He says, I want those facades to be part of the new building. So just
Well, I hope that's right. He has a pretty good track record.
Oh, he's got a great track record.
So I don't know what went into him on this one.
Well, I think it's a power struggle between
Well,
city.
But, so what was the issue about one of those buildings?
He said number 24 is not, he said to me, that's not heritage, so I could take it down. He says, but it might be a problem in that it could have a very negative effect on the building beside it, so I may have to incorporate it, that's what he said.
So that exercise that council went through, when was that, just around Christmas time?
Yeah.
Was to designate 18 and 22 and 28, not 24? Is that,
I'm just,
is staff, is that?
I'm just saying
your
what I
understanding?
heard, just saying what
I don't think that's correct, is it?
Could be.
No, through the chair, number 24 was included in
Yeah.
the notice.
So it's misunderstanding. But he said he doesn't think it can be taken down anyway. Like if he could take it down, he doesn't think that he should because it's part of the next building. But it was nice to hear him say that he would like to keep the facades.
This is about an added item after King Street.
We're now after King Street.
Yeah. I got a request in the mail from, actually a member of the committee, the inventory committee. He brought to my attention 1019 Wilson Street at the corner of Shaver and Wilson is up for sale. And it was built in 1856 and it's for sale for $2.5 million or something. It's been renovated and maybe never been sold. And it's near all, commercial area around there. So anyway, he was wondering what's happening with it. And I wondered if we should be adding that to our list of possible buildings to be aware of that could disappear. It's called the Egerton Shaver House.
Sal, you can correct the address, 1019 Wilson.
The number is 1019 Wilson Street West.
Okay.
Corner of Shaver and Wilson on the,
If it's something you'd like us, the subcommittee to look at, if you could send Stan and I as the co-chairs your request in writing, and then we'll look into it. And to try to get back to you with answers as to what's going on with the property.
Which is what we did today with the property custodian. Or, no, for sure. May I have a motion? Will, second by Michael, all in favor? Carried. Just. Buildings and land.
At the end of that, I have a building good news for me.
Buildings and landscapes of interest under yellow. Delta High School, we had our update today. James Street Baptist.
I'd say we've had our
Update
updated
today.
update.
Federal building, Michael.
It's going well. No concerns.
St. Mary Church.
next month, not next month, but May, I believe, is the vote to decide whether the churches are going to merge and what's going to happen to one or the other. And no further discussion until
So we'll keep our eye on that.
that meeting happens. We won't hear any more.
Heritage Properties.
Yeah.
Heritage Property update, Trouble Hall, Michael.
Okay.
Trouble Hall.
Apparently, there's a full-time resident in there. I do believe it's Mr. Freswick. I haven't heard anything about any mechanics because I think it's a slow progress.
Thomas Bolton.
Anything to report?
Desjardins Canal.
Nothing much to report either unless the city has something.
St. Mark's.
We were there yesterday. Students from, first-year students from Willowbank School of Restoration Arts came down, and we went there, and it's kind of interesting what's going on there. The approach to the conservation is to embrace the patina, basically fix it up and make it look, not touch it, like the front door. It's looks like it's 120 years old, but it's been conserved.
Ackmar.
I don't have a lot to report on that, with the exception of that I was hoping the Lord something would be able to carry on because there was going to be some, there was requests put up to the public businesses to come up with alternative uses and plans for it, and I haven't heard anything. But about Fleur apparently is now going to be used as a residence and a film location. And apparently Ackmar, this is the president, does the staff know anything about some of the proposals for the reuse of Ackmar?
No, through the chair, I don't think there's been any date set for that reporting back. I think there's some, it's a different process that they're trying to undertake, and it's challenging from a legal perspective, so there's no firm date for that coming.
Okay, thanks.
Westdale Theater, Councilman Henderson here. Stinson School. Okay.
For those of you who haven't either driven around it or walked around it at night, I would encourage you to do so. It looks absolutely fantastic with the lights on the apartments that are occupied. And when we walked around it last night, there's the parking lot at the back. It's got cars parked there because they live there. It's just amazing. And there's all the wonderful chandeliers and the brick and the wood, and it's amazing. Love it.
There's a few for rent.
Yes, it's cute for it. That's also, yeah.
So when you can ask the question, when we can take it off the list.
Take it off, it's on the good news. Oh, I see, what am I?
Any idea how many are occupied now?
People living there?
Yeah.
About a third. because there's still work being done on some of the other ones, and there's still, when you were there, there's still work that needs to be done in the hallways and stuff to make it safe. And I don't think that, like, the city has to come in, I do believe, and approve the rest of it ready for occupation before people can move in.
Occupation?
Was that?
Occupancy?
Yes.
Occupation.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I think you referred to it as a war zone.
There you go, that's what I thought. And I'm British too, we have a history of occupying other countries.
I used to occupy the principal's office there quite a bit.
Oh, I did that.
See, that makes it historic right there.
Heritage Properties update block. We've got All Saints Church. I think the deals are dead with that development.
Yeah.
Is there any update from?
I did hear from Reverend Rhonda, and they have some new people have approached them, several. And the day that I spoke to her, I said, boy, if you can find a proposal that works some of that church into your new design, that'd be great. But,
Do you know if Rancor is approaching?
big part.
Rancor, they approached them? They own all the land across the street.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered.
Upmore Gatehouse.
It did not do well this winter. It's so sad watching it just keep, every time I go, it was worse than it did.
Grove Hall Gateview, Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah, I haven't been up there the last couple of weeks, but demolition is this spring.
You got their permit.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there any other items? I figured.
Maybe you figured.
Michael, you commented on the issue.
Yeah, but my son and I have the privilege of being taken through, you might want to go through it. The building at King William and Houston showed me all the offices, the finished ones, and the majority of them are rented. There's a huge litigation firm going in on basically one whole floor of the building at the corner. He's managed to join two buildings, their floors are 3 feet apart. There's this much of a difference between the two buildings that are joined with the elevator in the middle. And it's just amazing the way he's managed to reconfigure it and to make it so it works with this. It's going to be rental, and so Urban Core or Core Urban is going to run it. There's a big communal area up top. It's kind of like a better version of the Seed Factory where you rent a desk, but this is you rent an office, but there's a whole community networking thing going on.
I used to live up there.
What's that?
I used to live up there.
Did you? And the Cornerstone Foundation restaurant that's going in the corner, where many restaurants, the Costa, various other ones have been over the years, is Chuck's Burgers from Wash Street. They're going to have the biggest Chuck Burgers that's going in. And the really interesting story is the Core Urban just purchased, the deal just closed, you heard it here first, unless you already heard it. He bought the old Sirloin Cellar building. And he's going to refurbish that, and he's going to make it into character heritage offices, much the same as he's done. There's so much reuse, much the same as the building at Bay and Herkimer, so much reuse and reclaimed that was part of that building. It is absolutely phenomenal. So, and he said, nobody wants to rent the generic offices over in Stucco Tower, and he's right. They got a great view, but they're boring. Right? And believe it or not, they cost less to rent than it would be to rent one of the Core Urbans, but people will line up to come and rent the Core Urban. So there is profit in preservation. I'm so pleased that that's happening. And so I've already got people who want to come and rent the Sirloin Cellar, and here's his empty offices right across the street for half the price. What does that thing? So people want history, want character. So there's your good news story for today.
So would they ever fix the city property with the alley and all that business? Did you hear from them on that?
Oh, behind?
Yeah, the gas pipe leak that goes right into the cellar and causes major water damage.
That's fixed.
The city settled it or something?
I'm not sure who settled it, but it's ready for the restaurant is about to be occupied. They're just doing all the renovations on it now.
You put another restaurant in?
That's what I just said, Chuck's
No,
Burgers.
no,
Yeah.
Oh, in the Sterling Cellar property?
No, I thought you were talking about.
Okay, next story.
Sorry. Okay, next story, yeah.
Kathy?
I have a question of our LA, and the question is, if one of us were to run for city council in Ward 9, would they be able to still be on this committee?
Well, you could be on it as the council member.
No, I think if you're going to run for something.
While running in the election period.
That I will check with our deputy clerk and I can
Well,
follow up.
Michael's running the shop.
Yeah, school trustee.
But neither you filed the papers yet, have you? Neither.
Are you running?
You
Okay.
heard it here first, there's the big
The
congratulations.
question was, neither of you filed papers, Kathy?
Let me tell you something. Oh, wait.
Have you filed the papers?
Right here, we're going downstairs.
Okay, once you file the papers,
Ron has a
I
question.
think it's a different situation than.
Well,
I think Kathy raises a point. Should our two, someone say, well, school board has nothing to do with this. Well, we just talked about how many schools.
You betcha.
But we're not in yet, so we don't have any say. I think after, there might be some
But
questions.
someone can say that you're gaining from it. We can say that, and it could be.
This is public, this is public. I know where you got, I don't really know if you should have an opinion on this.
ladies and gentlemen,
I'm raising the question.
Thank you.
Again, it's not what's actually happening, it's what the perception is.
so we've raised the question. Our clerk is gonna look into it. So it's for both council member and school board
I
trustee.
think it's for elected.
For the secretary, it's two different scenarios probably. When the papers are in, or the papers are not in, correct?
She's going to
Two
answer all
different
those questions.
scenarios. Once papers, you can say you're a candidate, but until you file papers, you're not a candidate, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So for both situations.
Yeah.
Were you running too?
No, absolutely not.
Paul, you were next on that.
Yes, I had a short question. The building heritage inventory, so you've got a list now of 1,037 or, what happens with that list and do we see it?
Through the chair. So it was at the planning committee on Tuesday. It still needs to be ratified by council next Wednesday. And after that, it will come to the Municipal Heritage Committee.
So when it went to planning committee, the address is all there? or-
In the appendix of the staff report
Oh.
is the consultant's report, which just have an appendix in their report of all of their recommendations for either addition to the register or potential further cultural heritage assessment work as part of the designation process. And those lists then need to be vetted through municipal heritage committee before any action is taken.
Is that online then?
It is, if you go through the council agenda, or the planning committee agenda,
Right.
you can download the report there. It's quite large. If you have any issues, you can contact clerks or ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
If there's nothing else, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Quickly, yeah, I noticed that, yeah, boy, that's the fastest we've done that.
All in favor? Carried. Well, happy spring.
Oh, yes. Be celebrating.
Feels like it.
45 minutes almost.
Do we carry the minutes?
So our clerk knows who you are.
So ours on
Oh, I see. But you can't even see them from
Are you keeping?
Yeah, I'll take them back.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Board meeting available, so which one was our city, the west, St. Joe's Healthcare site. Yeah, okay.
I'm very good at the whisper camera, and now that I'm the official council, Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Business Association, lots of people come into the which is close to some people often join us, so it's good.
Oh, the documents in the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess Brenda, is there anything else Did you send any books? No. Are you kidding? So if he's running for